Alright, welcome to the Chapter 5, Section 1, Lesson 1 homework about mid-segments. So this is number 2. Looking at that line 5x, you should recognize it's a midpoint. The way you know it's a midpoint is because of the lines here, 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 and here. That tells you that the point in the middle is midpoint. And the point in the middle on the other side is also a midpoint because they're exactly in the middle of those two segments. Those segments are bisected. Alright, now that we recognize that's a mid-segment, what we need to know about mid-segments to solve this problem is that this line that I'm highlighting is half the length of its parallel side, which would be this line. So we know it's half the length. Then, if we know the bottom one is 70, then we know if we divide by 2, the top one would have to be 35. Now we have a line segment that equals 35 and it equals 5x. So to solve for x, because they're the same, we'd say 35 is the same or equal to 5x. So divide both sides by 5 and x equals 7. So for number 6, once again we have this triangle at the right. We have a mid-segment in the middle. We know it's a mid-segment because this is a midpoint and this is a midpoint, so that makes this a mid-segment. That mid-segment is parallel to this line. Okay, so this is kind of the backwards of the other problem. If I know that the mid-segment is 4, I know the bigger line is double that, or 2 times that, so the bigger line would be 8. So now we know 8 and 5x minus 2 is the same segment, so we need to write an equation that says they are the same. So we will write 8 equals 5x minus 2. That says that those two numbers are the same. Then we'll do our algebra. Add 2 to both sides. We get 10 equals 5x. And divide by 5, and we get x equals 2. Alright, for number 7, the question asks us to find HE. Find HE, the length of that line, not angles, we're talking about lengths. So we look for, because we know in this problem that these are all midpoints, because it says point H, point E, and point D are midpoints, so I know that HE is a mid-segment that goes with VD. It's the one that's parallel with. My drawing's not perfect, but so looking at the information, we have UV is 80. Okay, so the line at the bottom is 80. So knowing that, and knowing this, that HE is the mid-segment that goes with VU, because they're the parallel segments, I would know that HE is half of 80, which would be 40, or 80 divided by 2. So HE equals 40. For number 14, it says name the segment that is parallel to the given segment. So we're looking for what line is parallel to AB. So AB is this line. What line is parallel to that? It's going to be the one that looks like it's parallel, and the only one that looks like it's parallel would be FE. So our answer to this would be AB is parallel to FE. And the way we know that these are definitely parallel are these tick marks. These tick marks here tell me that we have a midpoint right there, and the tick marks down here and here tell me I have a midpoint right there. Therefore, that FE is a mid-segment. Okay, for number 20, it says Kate wants to paddle her canoe across the lake. To determine how far she must paddle, she paced out a triangle, counting the number of strides as shown. Obviously, it's difficult to measure across the lake, so this triangle that she made is going to help her measure across the lake. Part A says if Kate's strides average 3.5 feet, what is the length of the longest side? So what's asking you to do first is identify the longest side. So if you look at that, some of you might have jumped to the 250, but that is not the longest side. This is the longest side because it's 150 plus 150, which is 300. Okay, so we know that that side is 300 feet, and it says Kate's strides average 3.5 feet. Oh, sorry, this side is 300 strides. So these are strides over here. Okay, so we have 300. What we'll have to do is times it by 3.5 to find how many feet, because each stride is 3.5 feet. And we get 1,050. For part B, it says, what distance must Kate paddle across the lake? Well, to answer part B, what you had to notice is that this segment is congruent to this segment, and this segment here is congruent to that segment, which makes that point there and that point there both midpoints. So the line I'm about to outline is then a mid-segment. So now that I know that's definitely a mid-segment, what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the line that's parallel to that mid-segment, and that would be the very bottom line right here. The very bottom line right there is 250. I know that a mid-segment is half of 250. So I'm going to do 250 divided by 2, and that gives me 125. So that across the lake is 125, but be careful, that is 125 strides. We need to change that into feet. So we'll do 125 times 3.5, just like we did in part A, and that gives me 437.5 feet across the lake. Okay, the directions say X is the midpoint of UV. Sorry. Hold on, let me switch some of the letters. Okay, once again, X is the midpoint of UV, and Y is the midpoint of UW. So I'm going to want to mark that on here. The way I mark that X is the midpoint is that I know this segment is congruent to this segment. The way I mark that Y is the midpoint is this segment has to be the same length as that segment. So now that I've marked this up, I know that right here I have a mid-segment. I'm going to run out of room. A mid-segment. So to find angles, now that I know this is definitely a mid-segment, this brings me to my second piece of information, is that this has to be parallel to that. So those two lines, this line right here is parallel to that line. Now we can use old information about corresponding angles, alternate interior angles, same side interior angles to find some of the missing angles. So I look and it says to find the measure of angle V. So it says find the measure of angle V. Angle V is right here. So I'm going to look at this line. This line right here is my transversal. I know that UXY is 60 because the problem tells me that UXY. So that would be this angle right here is 60. So it's asking for angle V, which would be this angle right here. I need to look at 60 and that angle and think, how are they related? The way they are related is they are corresponding angles. So if they are corresponding angles, that means their measure is equal. So therefore, the measure of angle V would also be 60.